The purpose of it all. God has something unique planned for each of us to do. The enemy doesn't like this. Do you know what your purpose is? If you don't, as you'll learn throughout this book, it may be more difficult for you to determine what and who are the true enemies coming against you. As I mentioned, I've known since I was young that I would be a pastor. And later, as we began the ministry in Greenville, I gained a clear understanding of the specifics, some mandates of how that ministry was to look. As I tell more of the story of my encounter with enemies, you will see, because I had a clear understanding of my purpose and the mandates of our church's ministry, why I knew I was in a serious fight and had to dig in. The enemy, or rather enemies, were coming against my purpose. You and I have an enemy, Satan, who wants to ensure that the purposes of God are not accomplished, and he uses people and whatever else is available. So whenever I see something or someone that stands in the way of the mandates of God's purpose on my life, I identify them as enemies that I must engage. Ultimately, the battle will be the Lord's, and when it's over, these enemies will be my footstool. But I have to do the fighting. So, what do I mean by purpose? For many people, it's a vague concept that doesn't have much useful meaning. That's unfortunate. I do not have nearly the space here to fully explain how anyone can find purpose, but this is a brief overview. Based on a lot of good instruction from others and my own study and experience, basically I believe purpose relates to the fact that the Bible says our lives are hidden with Christ in God. Colossians chapter 3, verse 3. I believe God has planned your whole life in heaven. The Bible says He foreknew you, predestined you, called you, justified you, glorified you. And all of it is past tense. And He also wants what's in heaven to be done on earth. Another way to understand this is to think in terms of how a frame defines a house. When you look at the evolution of a building project, you can understand that while the house's framework is part of the finished building, the framework itself is not the actual building. If you walk by a new house under construction, you'll see the building crew working on the framing. At this point in the development, you can't tell many details about the house. Without reading the blueprints, there's no clue what the exterior walls will look like, if there will be brick or stone around the fireplace, or what type of countertop is going in the kitchen. And even the blueprint won't show you final details, like the style of furniture the owner will choose. However, by looking at all those 2x4s and 2x6s that make up the framework, you can see the general shape the house will take. When God gives you an insight about your purpose, this is a framework being set in place, within which the life that lies ahead of you will be lived. You don't know all the details and everything in every moment that will take place, but you can see, as construction continues, the framework of what the architect intends. When I was a young man, I knew God had given me an insight that someday I would be in ministry. I had few details of what price tag would hang on that framework. I certainly knew nothing of the battles I would face and the giants I would have to slay. However, having this sketch of my future in ministry gave me an understanding of how I would be spending my time, and, consequently, how I would not be spending my time. It gave me a framework for my daily activities, as opposed to how my day might look in a different calling. So I believe you arrive at your purpose through a number of things, such as through a devotional life and through people God assigns with oversight in your life, individuals who see things in you that you don't see. Purpose has many clues and many indicators. It won't just be God taking you on the side of a mountain, like he did with Moses. It's you seeing the pieces of your life and answering questions such as, why do I think like I think? Why am I tied to what I'm tied to? Why have specific voices been placed in my life? What do I value? What is my specific set of gifts? Your gifts are clues and indicators as to what you've been put on the earth to do. God also positions you in certain places, even certain geographical locations. And once all these indicators and clues are assembled, you begin to snap together pieces to the puzzle, which in time starts looking like a picture. And all that together begins to clarify your purpose. So you conclude, well, this must be why I'm on the earth. Then you begin to pursue that picture as God opens doors and orders your steps. And the reality is that as you move closer and closer to completing that picture, there are many doors you have to open, and many enemies you have to slay along the way. By the way, I don't believe God gets involved in every single little struggle of my life. He doesn't get his nerves shot when my kid gets called to the principal's office, or my printer runs out of ink. Some people want God to get tore up every time they get tore up. Of course he cares about the details of our lives, but I think he only gets tore up when a battle threatens our purpose, because he has already ordered our steps toward an intended end. Solomon wrote in Ecclesiastes chapter 3 that life will take you through seasons. There's a time to live and a time to die, a time to mourn and a time to rejoice, and so on. I believe enemies will come along to show you these seasonal changes. It is those adversities in life that you have to conquer when they pop up. They are signifying to you that one thing is finished and another thing is beginning, that you are heading toward full completion and the purpose God has assigned you. I want to finish the story of the man who gave me a new appreciation for my interest in country music. I was a little surprised when 3 weeks later, that guy with the 12-gauge became the third member of our church and our first praise team drummer. Granted, it took a while for him to overcome his drinking problem, so each Sunday morning I'd come to church early, brew a pot of strong coffee, and pour the Joe down his throat to sober him up in time to play drums for worship. I'll never forget our first Easter Sunday. The praise team kept stopping during the first 2 songs. I wondered why. Then I realized that the drummer, still wearing off his Good Friday and Saturday night binges, was playing completely different songs than the singers were singing. More than just because they're funny stories, I share these because I see that early on in our ministry, enemy by enemy, we had to win on every level. Mountain by mountain, we had to move every one of them. In our early days, just forming a band seemed like a giant in the valley, and the big obstacle was finding one band member who could be sober. At the time, that was so monumental in my mind. I realize now that I had to overcome it, or I wouldn't have gotten to the next place. Giants come in stages and levels. That's why God, who won't give us more than we can handle, doesn't give us the Goliaths in life before we fight the lions and bears on the backside of the hill, where we're still tending sheep. Every conflict, if embraced properly, will reveal itself to you as a necessary step toward purpose and destiny.